we stand by as children starve by the millions because we lack the will to eliminate hunger. Yet we have found the will to develop missiles flying over the polar cap and landing within a few hundred feet of their target. This is not innovation. It is a profound distortion of humanity's purpose on Earth.
Welcome to Mike Up, the next chapter. I'm your host, Kristin Guglielmo. On this show, we explore the people and the ideas that are shaping what's next, whether it's in business, community, or our democracy. Today, I am honored to be joined by Sam Daley-Harris, the founder of RESULTS and Civic Courage, and author of Reclaiming Our Democracy, Every Citizen's Guide to Transformational Advocacy. For more than 4 decades, Sam has been helping everyday people find their voice and create real change, building bridges between citizens and policymakers, and proving that grassroots advocacy can transform lives and change our world. In our conversation, we'll talk about how results began, the moment that proved ordinary citizens could make extraordinary differences, and what's working right now in civic engagement. We'll also dive into what keeps Sam motivated, his advice for anyone who wants to step into advocacy with courage and impact. Sam, welcome to our show. It's such a privilege to have you here.
It's great to be with you.
So Sam, tell us about yourself and what inspired you to found RESULTS, as well as how your journey in civic engagement began.
Well, great. With the tell me about yourself question, I always answer it using kind of a method called the story of self. And it was developed by Harvard professor Marshall Gans. And it basically asks, what happened in your life and what decisions did you make that got you to your commitment? And when I tell my story of self, I really urge listeners and viewers to think about their own. What happened in your life and what decisions did you make that got you to this podcast and to your own commitments in life? So here's my slightly wacky story of self. I have a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in music, and I played percussion instruments in the Miami Philharmonic Orchestra for 12 years and taught high school music. And then 45 years ago, I founded the anti-poverty lobby RESULTS. And a lot of times I'm asked, music, poverty lobby, what's the connection? And when I look back in my life, there's certain experiences that start pointing me in a different direction. The death of a friend around high school graduation in 1964 and the assassination of U.S. Senator Robert Kennedy around college graduation in 1968 got me to asking the questions of purpose. Why am I here? What am I here to do? What's my purpose? 9 years later, it's now 1977, I'm invited to a presentation on ending world hunger put on by the Hunger Project. And I go to this event thinking, well, hunger's inevitable. What do I know? I'm a musician. I'm thinking it's inevitable because there are no solutions. Again, what do I know? I'm thinking because if there were solutions, somebody would have done something by now. But I go to this event and it's obvious right away. There's no mystery to growing food, clean water, basic health. I'm not hopeless about the perceived lack of solutions. I'm feeling hopeless about human nature. People will just never get around to doing the things that can be done. But there's one human nature I have some control over, my own, and my questions, why am I here? What am I here to do? So I get involved in a big way. This is the end of the story. In 1978 and 1979, I spoke to 7,000 high school students, classroom by classroom, on ending world hunger. And before I went into the first classroom, I read some statements from Jimmy Carter's Commission on World Hunger and others calling for the political will to end hunger. So I asked 7,000 high school students, what's the name of your member of Congress? I don't want to know if you wrote them. I don't want to know if you, just the name. Out of 7,000 asked, 200, fewer than 3% could answer correctly. 6,800, over 97% couldn't tell me the name of their member of Congress. And results grew, that was like over 97%. And results grew out of this gap between the calls for the political will to end hunger on the one hand, and the lack of basic information on who represented us in Washington. So that's my story of self. And I urge folks that are listening to this, think about your own. What happened in your life? What decisions did you make that got you to your own commitments? I think it's a really important piece of activism, really.
Yeah, I mean, the way you were brought up, the values, and again, the personal experiences. I always look at how fortunate I have been with the parents that I had and the influences, and it really shapes who you are. I come from a political family. My father was in the state Senate for I think 26 years, helping the people
Well,
get find their voice, because a lot of times they can't get to the right people. So that was his favorite part of that job, was constituent service. So I understand this background, and it's so important. How do everyday people influence decisions in Congress and beyond?
Okay, well, that's a big question. And I think the beginning story is that you have to get over your powerlessness. In other words, how do people influence decisions in Congress? Not by thinking, I can't do anything. They won't listen to me. I can't make a difference. So one of the key things is I call it to find a structure of support that will feed you power. And the main idea of the book that I'd written, it's called Reclaiming Our Democracy, Every Citizen's Guide to Transformational Advocacy. And the main idea is transformational advocacy, not transactional, sign the petition, transaction complete, but transformational advocacy, where you're trained, encouraged, and succeed at doing things as an advocate you never thought you could do, like meet with a member of Congress and bring them on board to your issue. And when you do those things that you never thought you could do, you see yourself differently. That's the transformation. So this takes us back to your question, is how do you make a difference with decision makers in Congress? I'm going to start with how you don't make a difference. There was a survey by the Congressional Management Foundation, and they asked nonprofit advocacy professionals, advocacy staff, what their primary tactic was. And 79% said their primary tactic was an email form letter. Give me your name and your zip code and we'll send the email for you. Only 3% of congressional staff said an email form letter was highly effective. So we're mostly getting email form letters, and only 3% of congressional staff says that's highly effective. 94% said an in-person issue visit from constituents, that's us, is either highly effective or effective percent. So my answer, I can answer it more as we go, is to get out of behind the cell phone and the laptop and get in front of your members of Congress. And to do that, you need to find an organization. And we'll talk about this later, of how you can go to my website, reclaimingourdemocracy.com, and I can help you find such an organization that will feed you power, not feed you petitions to sign.
Yeah. So, showing up and not, staying behind the computer, just emailing or signing that petition showing up at those in the state, or whatever you can to support. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So
Yeah.
for listeners who may not be familiar, can you share what Results is all about and what made it different from other advocacy efforts at the time?
Okay, well, great. Yeah, so in simple terms, I'm going to talk generically for a moment about the groups I've coached. I started Results, and then I went on to coach Citizens Climate Lobby, the Quaker Lobby, Friends Committee on National Legislation, and others. And they follow a transformational advocacy methodology, which includes three particular ingredients, simplified. One is recruitment and community building. So results, and you ask, how does it differ from most of the other organizations at the time? Now, this is 45 years ago when it was founded. And we did a trial and error to come up with this. So one is recruitment and community building. Recruitment, bringing new people in, not just to build an e-blast list, but to form them into local chapters so they're not working alone. So that's the recruitment. And the community building is, for example, an organization like Results and the others I just mentioned have a monthly whole of organization webinar with guest speakers, Q&A, inspiration. So recruitment and community building is one ingredient for Results and some of these others. Two is training. How do you get the meeting with the elected official? How do you plan for the meeting? What do you ask for in the meeting? How do you write a letter to the editor? Two is training. Three, and this is a big one, three is the organization encourages breakthroughs. They encourage you to do things you never thought you could do. That gets back to the transformation again. And there's a drawing in the book, a very small circle labeled your comfort zone. And next to it is a much larger circle labeled where the magic happens. And so you're looking for an organization that will encourage you out of your comfort zone over to where the magic happens. So recruitment and community building. Now, if you want to get involved in a group, but they don't form local chapters, then it's not even what we're talking about. And community building, if they don't have a whole of organization webinar with guest speakers, that's not what we're talking about if they don't do that. Training is too, and encouraging breakthroughs. So those are some of the, generically, some of the things that Results did eventually in the early days even, that distinguished it from a lot of the other organizations.
So what were some of the early wins that really showed you that this movement was working?
Right. Okay. And so it's an early win, but I'm going to actually take it to today. So one of the things we started lobbying on was child survival globally. We learned in the early 80s that 40,000 children around the world were dying every day from preventable stuff, malnutrition coupled with preventable diseases like measles and other things. And so we started lobbying in 1984 on a thing called the Child Survival Fund. Now they call it maternal and child health. When we started lobbying in the early 80s, as I said, 40,000 children were dying around the world every day from largely preventable malnutrition and disease. Results has lobbied on this for 41 years, and the child death rate globally has fallen by 66% from 40,000 a day to 13,125 a day. It's a dramatic change. Now,
That's amazing.
I have to add that sadly, it is extraordinary. I mean, of course, we don't read about it in the newspaper. I mean, there's a New York Times columnist, Nick Kristof, who usually does a column at the end of the year around New Year's about the world is much better than you thought it was, talking about declining poverty and declining child deaths. And this is one example. Now, the bad news, and then I'll give you a glimmer of hope, is that when Elon Musk came on board with his chainsaw to global health programs and more. It's put this in jeopardy of going back up again. In fact, there's a report from the British Medical Journal suggesting that 14 million more people will die between now and 2030 than otherwise would have. Some 4 or 5 million of them children. But so here's the transformational advocacy good news to that. The House Appropriations Committee, not the Democrats, the House Appropriations Committee finalized their bill on global health. And I'll give you one example. Maybe later I'll give you another. Maternal and child health last year, 2025, was funded at $915 million to help this decline in child deaths continue. President Trump's budget for 2026 cuts it by more than 90% to $85 million. The House Appropriations Committee funded it at the full $915 million. There's your glimmer of hope. The Senate has to act next, and then the president needs to sign a final version into law. But it's like the beginning signs of backbone in Congress, because they know, not every one of them, but the ones on the key subcommittee and then the full committee know the result of their work over decades. And so hopefully there will be this rebound, this turnaround, so that this example of a success of citizen advocacy, of transformational advocacy. Let me say one other thing. Where did this happen? Well, it happened from annual lobbying by constituents and more. But this year in 2025, 2 House Republicans and 2 House Democrats led in getting a grand total of 128 members of the House to sign one letter to the top appropriators, asking them for strong funding for maternal and child health and some other related programs. So when you're on this little subcommittee, maybe there are 13 members on the appropriations subcommittee, and you get a letter from 128 of your House colleagues asking you to pay attention to this, well, you're more likely to do that. Well, the question is, yeah, and let me just add, how do you get 128 members of the House? Well, part of it is their constituents called them out, met them, wrote them letters to the editor, etc., to urge them to take that stand. So
yeah, they said that this is important to them.
I'm very excited.
Yeah, that's amazing, and that's how people need to get involved. They need to show how important these issues are to them, and make sure that they're.
Yes. Let me give you another example. Yeah. Let me give you another example of why people's voices matter. One of the groups I'm coaching, the United Church of Christ Climate Hope Affiliates. It's new this year. They started their first 8 chapters in March. Not all in that month, but starting in March, they began starting their chapters. I think they're going to start their 9th very soon in Northern California. But one of the things they're working on, this is different, but the sad thing is most people don't know about it. For next year, meaning the current fiscal year 2026 started in October 1. That's when the government shut down. But for 2026, for the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, President Trump called for a 55% cut to the EPA. The House, not the Democrats, the House Appropriations Committee called for a 23% cut. The Senate called for a 5% cut. Well, I don't know. If you're committed to the environment, you might want to know that there's a choice between 50, 23, or 5% cut. And so it's those citizens that are involved in those groups that are working on protecting the Environmental Protection Agency, for example, that know about this and are building relationships with their members of Congress, House and Senate, and encouraging them to take a stand for the more modest 5% cut to the EPA. That's just another example of there's so many possibilities. Let me say one last thing. I'm sorry for talking too much, but I like to say protest is really important, but we need people going inside and building relationships too. If you said, oh, no more, no, I'd say, no, protest is important, but going inside and building relationships is important too, for the reasons I've just been describing.
So, getting the word out, what is people need to pay attention what's happening. And that's, one of the things I think a lot of people do not. Yeah. So you later founded Civic Courage.
And if I could add this, you said people need to pay attention to what's happening. I think you're going to put in the program notes a sign-up sheet so that if you're listening to this and you're getting interested or maybe even excited and you'd like to connect with one of these groups, I can help you. And if you either go to the program notes for that sign-up sheet, or if you go to reclaimingourdemocracy.com, you can let me know that you'd like to get help connecting with one of the groups. Or if you have a speaking possibility, like your church or synagogue or school or class or club, that's another possibility, because I'm wanting to get the word out, talking to you, on mic check to get the word out. So it's like I said, the first ingredient was recruitment and community building. So I'm doing what I'm urging others to do.
I love it. So you later founded Civic Courage. How does that build on the foundation of results? And what lesson did you learn about sustaining advocacy?
Well, okay, so let me say this. So Civic Courage essentially coaches other organizations who want to deliver transformational advocacy. And what I've learned is the main reason groups don't want to deliver transformational advocacy or fail at delivering transformational advocacy is the fear of making big asks of volunteers. In other words, I'll give you an example. If you're going, I know one of my colleagues that I'm coaching is going to Northern California and starting a chapter this weekend coming up. And one of the asks, let's say there are 20 people in the room and he wants to start a chapter and have people raise their hand. I'm in, I want to be in this. One of the asks is that we're going to start this chapter with a 4-part new group training every week for 4 weeks, or every other week for 8 weeks, 90 minutes per training. Well, that's a big ask. And a lot of times, people will apologize or avoid making that kind of ask. See, what if there are 20 in the room and we want to start a chapter, and one of the first things we start with is a 4-part new group training? Who's going to say yes to that? What if nobody raises their hand and I leave with nothing? Well, that's the fear of making big asks of volunteers. And, to have big results, you have to get trained and to do big things.
Well, in baseball, you only have to hit 3 out of 10 and you're a rock star. So hopefully you find those 3 that are going to be, committed, and they bring 3 more, and a grassroots growing of the organizations.
Yep. Yeah, I know that well. My son does analytics and player development, Moneyball, for one of the Major League Baseball teams. So, yeah, we're a baseball family.
That's cool. Yeah.
And you fail a lot. 7 out of 10 times.
Yeah, and 7 out of 10 times you fail. So you have to make sure that you get back up, because if you don't, then you really failed. You got to keep going forward.
But most of us fail before we even start. And so if I could tell this story about how we need to stop failing before we even start. I was interviewed last year on a national NPR radio program. It was called 1A. And this was question number 2 in a 13-minute interview. I was very moved by how vulnerable the interviewer was. Question number 2, the passive nature to our politics today, you can feel beat down by it. I mean, this is my career and I feel beat down by it. I don't participate the same way others do because I'm a political journalist, but I do have to pay attention. It's a grind. It's a grind, Sam. I mean, I know you know that. What am I feeling? What is the way out of that? So I was so moved that he was so actually speaking for the country in a way. You know, this is my career and I feel beat down by it. It's a grind. It's a grind. The first thing I said was Apollo astronaut Rusty Schweikert said, we aren't passengers on Spaceship Earth. We're the crew. Well, are we? And if we're crew, how does crew operate? The second thing I said was futurist and climate activist Alex Steffen said, in fact, these days, cynicism is obedience. Well, yeah, if I'm cynical, I'm obedient to the way things are. I'm not going to do anything about it. Why would I if nothing I do makes a difference? And so, you talked about kind of not giving up. And I'm saying too many times we give up before it even starts. I'm going to give you one last example. After that interview, I met another author. He's a professor at Stanford, and he wrote a book titled Hope for Cynics, The Surprising Science of Human Goodness. And in the book, he said, if you're cynical, it's like you're playing poker and you fold your hand before the game even starts. And I say, if you're a civic cynic, then you fold your hand before the Congress is even sworn in, before the first bill is even introduced. And so we have to be on the lookout for that cynicism that can keep us from even getting started. And that's why joining one of these organizations that provide a structure of support and encouragement and hopefully inspiration is one way to serve
and
ourselves.
guiding you on how you're supposed to do it.
Training and more.
And
Yep,
I actually did a podcast. I did a podcast with a nonprofit recently, and this is exactly what they're trying to figure out is how do they get in front of Congress to share their mission of what they're trying to do. So I will make sure that I send your book over there too. So you captured a lot in
Okay, great. Well, let me tell you this quick story talking about how do I get in front of Let me tell you this story around how do I get in front of Congress. I did a column, well, it was published yesterday in The Fulcrum. It's a democracy newsletter called The Fulcrum. And I write about this group in Utah who in September of 2025 had a 3.5-hour hike with their Republican senator from Utah, John Curtis. Talk about getting in front of your member of Congress. I said, wait a minute, whoa, how did this start? And they said, well, before he was in the Senate, he was in the House. He was first year in 2017, which was Trump's first year. And when he was a first year freshman member of the House, he announced that he was going to have a town hall hike. And it was going to be an 8-hour town hall hike. And 8 people went on it, 6 of them from this group, Citizens Climate Lobby. And after so many showed up, he promised them their own annual hike. So he does a hike with them every year. And so in September of 2025, there were about 25 volunteers on a 3.5-hour hike with their Republican senator. That's getting in front of your elected official, if there is it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah. I mean, what a way to listen to your constituents and really, hear what they're saying. That's fabulous.
Actually,
That
on their
story.
first hike in 2017. Yeah, and let me tell you the beginning part again. On that first hike in 2017, one of the volunteers asked the then new congressman, "What are you going to do about carbon?" And he thought, "Well, I was just the mayor of Provo, Utah. I never thought about carbon." And so the interaction started there. And a couple of years later, he launched the Conservative Climate Caucus. And by the end of last year, by the end of 2024, there were 87 Republicans on the Conservative Climate Caucus in the House of Representatives, some of them BS and some of them serious. But it just shows how of the first hike and a question, what are you going to do about carbon, eventually grew to his forming this Conservative Climate Caucus.
Wow. Wow. So you captured a lot of your experience in your book, Reclaiming Our Democracy. What else do you hope readers take away from it? And how do you see its message resonating in today's climate?
Well, I mean, to say that many people, not everyone, but to say that many people are in some agony about what's going on. Actually, the title of the column that I just had published was "Feeling Fed Up Isn't a Flaw, It's Fuel." And, my hope is that the book, Reclaiming Our Democracy, will show people how to use that fuel and not to crawl under a rock and hide away, but how to get engaged, how to be inspired about who they can be in the world. You could be a member of an organization that's led in an advocacy way, 66% decline in global child deaths over the last 41 years. Hopefully, the book will show you and inspire you to find your own path, that one or one of the others that are open to folks who want to get involved.
Yeah. And make a difference. Have a purpose, like you said in the beginning. So important. It's so important for everyone to have that purpose, and hopefully people will strive to find it.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
So
When
fast
I
forward
talked
today.
earlier about my story of self, when I talked earlier about my story of self, another, it's described as knowing your why and sharing it, which is what you said, know your purpose and find your purpose, knowing your why and sharing it. And that's what that's all about.
That's fantastic. So, fast forward to today, what's working for Results and Results Educational Fund right now? And are there any current initiatives you're especially excited about?
Well, yeah, I mean, we talked about global child death rates and the action. I want to tell another story. In 2019, President Trump's first term, he called for a 29% cut to the Global Fund to fight AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria after the Global Fund had saved 38 million lives between 2002 and about 2017. So he calls for a 29% cut. Well, most people don't even know that the president called for that cut back in 2019. But the folks I know knew about it, and they rolled up their sleeves and they got to work. They got members of Congress and senators to co-sponsor resolutions supporting the Global Fund, to sign letters to top appropriators in support of it. And when I do my talk, I always say, and people either on Zoom and they can see everyone, or I'm live in person in the room, I'll say, what do these revolutionary advocates look like? And then I'll say, look around the room or look on Zoom. That's what they look like. They look like you. And then I show a photo of a woman, Margaret Smith from Dallas, Texas, and she's holding her Senator Ted Cruz's hands with two hands. And she said to me, I learned in Results that I hold Senator Cruz's hands with two hands and I don't let go until I finish my laser talk on the Global Fund to fight AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria. And that was the first year that Senator Cruz ever said yes to one of the results requests. And at the end of that campaign, and I'm going to bring it up to today, at the end of that campaign, 2 House Republicans and 2 House Democrats stood on a stage and announced in Lyon, France, at the Global Fund replenishment back in 2019, and announced that the Congress would provide a 16% increase to the Global Fund rather than President Trump's 29% cut, which the president then signed into law. Well, today, the Global Fund and its partners have saved 70 million lives since 2002 when it was launched. Where do you read in the newspaper about 70 million lives saved? And so that's something Results is working on. Now, again, Elon Musk and Donald Trump and Marco Rubio have kind of brought their demolition derby to global health programs. But here's the glimmer of hope. In the newest bill, appropriations bill, the Global Fund to fight AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria, which has saved 70 million lives with its partners since 2002, is funded in 2025 at $1.65 billion. President Trump asked for a more than 50% cut to $800 million. Well, the House, not the Democrats, the House Appropriations Committee agreed to 1.5 billion, not 1.65, but 1.5. So the Senate needs to act next. But you ask, well, what is Results working on now? And that's one example. And again, 2 House Republicans and 3 House Democrats led 160 members of the House to sign a different letter to the top appropriators asking for robust funding for the Global Fund to fight AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria, and PEPFAR. And if I'm going to just share this quote, it's like, if anyone's listening and thinking, well, yeah, but why do we care about people in other countries who are poor, and why would we do that? There's this quote, I'm going to share it because I love it, and I think it speaks to what we actually do care about deep inside. This is from the late Republican senator from Oregon, Mark Hatfield, and he said many decades ago, we stand by as children starve by, I may say this twice. He said, we stand by as children starve by the millions because we lack the will to eliminate hunger. Yet we have found the will to develop missiles flying over the polar cap and landing within a few hundred feet of their target. This is not innovation. It is a profound distortion of humanity's purpose on Earth. He said, but we have found the will to develop missiles capable of flying over the polar cap and landing within a few hundred feet of their target. This is not innovation. It is a profound distortion of humanity's purpose on Earth. End of quote from Republican Senator, the late Mark Hatfield. And I think most people get that.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. And finally, how can people connect with Results or any other of the other organizations that you coached?
Right. So in the program notes, there'll be a sign-up sheet. You can go there, or you can go to the website, reclaimingourdemocracy.com, and click on Learn More. And Learn More will provide the same sign-up sheet where you could let me know that there's a group you'd like help connecting with. You could also let me know if you'd like to join my mailing list, the Civic Courage mailing list. And you can let me know if you have a speaking idea, like to your church or synagogue or your club or a class you're in or the class that you teach. And you can connect by going to reclaimingourdemocracy.com.
That's so great. Sam, thank you for sharing your story and your wisdom with us today. Your decades of work remind us that democracy isn't a spectator sport. It's something we build together. Again, for our listeners, you can learn how to get involved by visiting the link in the program notes or by going to www.reclaimingourdemocracy.com and clicking on the Learn More to access the sign-up sheet. Thank you for tuning into Mic Up. the next chapter. I'm Kristin Guglielmo. See you next time. Thank you so much, Sam.
Thank you.